Lindsey McDonald, it's great to have you on the Singletrack podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Finn. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And I got to ask you a question that is totally irrelevant to Cape Town first. And it's about Fantasy Free Trail. I noticed that you took top 10 in the picks for Javelina last month. And that's pretty impressive, but also pretty hardcore because I know a lot of the people that regularly top 10 in that, and they're encyclopedias. So I got to ask, would you consider yourself to be sort of an ultra running nerd?
Yeah, I think just I border on that nerd status. I'm a stats person. I don't hold it too closely, but I like to look at all of it and kind of let it percolate and then settle. And then yeah, it's a mix of stats and luck. So yeah, it's I mean I guess it's kind of like gambling, but it's fun for me.
I'm terrible at it, but I still participate.
I
I
should
think
I should
also,
insert real quick. The
yeah,
friend who I am going to Cape Town with won Fantasy Free Trail last year. They had that big prize package of an
really.
entry, airfare, and hotel, and that's who I'm going with. So you really should interview the boss of Fantasy Free Trail, and that's probably the best prize package Fantasy's ever seen, I imagine.
And what's their name?
His name's Matt Hadley. He's also from Kansas City. I don't know how
Okay.
he won that. It's crazy. He didn't even know. I had to text him. I was like, "You're going to Cape Town next year, and I'm coming to."
Maybe we have to start having him on for preview episodes because he can be the oracle of predictions.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, I mean, this is your first time on the pod, so I think it's good to do some background. I was sort of scoping your LinkedIn and saw that you have sort of like a marketing background, but also you spend a lot of time in the running industry in addition to being an athlete yourself. So talk about that.
Yeah, so I was in the advertising world. I have a design and marketing degree, and then I worked for three different ad agencies here in Kansas City. So from there, I had a lot of kind of part-time jobs stacked on top of that, kind of looking for a way out of corporate America. I now am self-employed and work for myself. So I put in a lot of, those 50, 60 hour set, I don't know, big weeks working 2, 3 jobs. I worked as a race timer and course marker on weekends for a few years. I worked with for a couple weeks over in London, helping with the Adidas. That's how you say it in Europe. Merchandising team for their London Marathon store, and I also had a small like contracted job with ASICS, kind of being on the ground merchandising assistant. So yeah, just kind of checked out a lot of different avenues and dipped my toes in a lot of different types of marketing rounds. And yeah, I learned a lot and jumped out on my own in 2017 and have been self employed as kind of a digital marketing consultant ever since then.
Have you enjoyed the business side of the sport as much as the actual physical activity, or is there a difference
Oh,
there?
it's really intriguing to me. I do love kind of the tea on the marketing sides, the different directions that super shoes and the marketing tactics that go with that are fascinating. I don't know
Yeah.
what's going to hit us next, but this new concept of what single use or two-time use super shoes
Yeah.
is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's intriguing. It's also I think it also makes you a little pessimistic on representing brands at the same time. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're kind of like, well, I'm a just another part of their marketing ploy. So
A
like being
machine.
very careful at who you actually associate with and represent.
Well, we'll have to probably do a whole episode on that at some point, but maybe one more question. How'd you land in Flagstaff?
That is a good question. I actually have only been there 2.5 years. And yeah, I'm from here in Kansas City, Missouri. Uh, I took a roundabout way to trail running. I ran for a small NAIA school here in Kansas City, and I was a walk on. I played soccer in high school and just ran for fun. I ran a marathon in high school for fun because I was partially my origin story of running was more of kind of a disordered eating. It was not necessarily healthy when I started running, but college helped me turn it into something much healthier, which is sort of counterintuitive to a lot of people's college stories. I had for the first time role
Yeah.
models that showed me, running quickly requires a lot of fuel and it requires like losing that grasp on control in terms of overtraining and undereating. So so yeah, then after college, I dabbled in the road scene, a very average road runner, but we still have trails here in Kansas City. We have pretty easy access to trail systems. They're not extensive, but I always was on trails even in college because I found them more stimulating than running long runs on roads. So I would do a lot of my long runs still on trails even in college. And then I don't know. I mean, my husband and I both worked for ourselves. And when I was freed up from the corporate world and a traditional 9 to 5, we started exploring different locations for like a month or two. We'd travel and we'd work remotely. So, we'd go to
Yeah.
Austin for a few months. I love Austin, Texas. Went there twice. We went to Phoenix. So I got close to Flagstaff. I never visited Flagstaff. And then in 2019, we did a 2 month kind of like altitude stint in Flagstaff. And I just began to dip my toes in this mountain running, and it was wild. I never really felt kind of that intrigued, but also like way out of my comfort zone. And some of those runs that I did, they were just, I mean, the trails aren't particularly difficult in comparison to, European trails, but we do have some pretty technical, gnarly terrain. And I would map out these routes and just get rocked. And I'd be like, wow, I have, there's so much I could improve on, so much potential here, but I'm so intrigued by it. And just the mountains in general became my passion really in that 2019 altitude camp. And so we went back to Kansas City. COVID hit. This is a very long-winded answer. COVID
No,
hit.
no, no, no. There's no such thing.
COVID hit, and I was like, I need to get out of the city. There's nothing to do. I mean, all we have is the outdoors now. And so we ended up going to Breckenridge for about 5 weeks. Everything was deeply discounted because nobody was traveling. So we camped out there, and then we returned back to Flagstaff. And this second time around was more of an introduction to the community. So I found pretty deep roots in the community there in a pretty quick time, which is really cool to be able to meet a close friend group in about 2 months. And then I went back to Kansas City again. I'm like, we need to move. I can't stay here. I need something to explore. There's nothing to explore. I mean, yeah, relatively speaking, there's no grand adventures in the city. So we moved in 2021.
What have you seen as the keys to your success, having been there now for about 2 years, and it sort of kind of mapping almost neatly to your intro into the sport as well?
Keys to success. I mean, just being patient, really patient with kind of the musculoskeletal demands of mountain running. So, you can sort of translate flat road economy, but it's like muscular-skeletally. It takes time to be able to go up and down and up and down and beat up your body and recover from that and make those adaptations. So, I mean, I tell a lot of people, I mean, I walked a lot of mountains before I ever ran mountains. So there's no shame in doing a lot of hiking, a lot of walking. I still do that in training. My doubles a lot of times are not running. They're power hiking, they're hiking. It's easy on the body. And you still make those same adaptations. It's patience with it.
Who are you training with?
Ooh, there's a lot of great people in Flagstaff. So I'm part of the Aravaipa Race Team, and conveniently, quite a few of them are located up in northern Arizona. So you probably know Georgia Porter. She's a hot name these days, dominating kind of the longer 100-mile races. I run with her quite a bit. Sadly, I think she's moving towards more of the flat runnable races, and I'm moving towards the more gnar, really, really technical stuff. And she doesn't love that quite as much as I do, but we still run quite a bit together. We have Nicole Hansen, who is on their Aravaipa team as well. She'll push me on flat runs. I need her to keep my flat running economy, my running speed. So I run with her. I know Preston was on this podcast. Preston's who I go to if I have a kind of insane backcountry route that no one else will touch. And I'm like, hey, you want to go spend 8-9 hours hiking off trail in the middle of nowhere? Preston's like, yeah, wait, where do I show up? Yeah, there's a good mix. I mean, all sorts of, we have quite a few talented runners up there that are, popping in and out. I mix it up quite a bit.
In terms of like how you measure progress or inspiration, do you get more comfort from organizing a lot of your runs in sort of like a group format, or do you like to do a lot of solo stuff?
I'd say it's like, I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's a group format. I I team up with one, maybe two individuals pretty often, but not usually in a group setting. And I'd say, like, at the beginning of a block, when it's less specific, you can get more people to join you. And as a block gets more specific at the end of it, we're kind of going off and like I needed to do hard climbing, like very long runs with certain specific intensity on terrain that most people don't want to run on for Cape Town. So,
Yeah.
It got a little more lonely as the months progressed, but I try to I intentionally seek out people to run with, because that keeps me motivated, and the social aspect of it is really fun and stimulating for me.
Getting more towards Cape Town, what has intrigued you about this race? What brings you to the race?
What brings me to the race? I love loop courses. I love a good loop. And this is a nice, beautiful loop showcasing some beautiful climbs in Cape Town. It's really rugged and intense. I'm sure you've seen photos and spoken to other people who have raced it, but there's a lot of rocks. The terrain just looks crazy. I've seen people scrambling. I love scrambling. So there's little bits of everything to it. And I love a good challenge. There's quite a bit of climbing to it. So, I mean, those are aspects I look for in a race. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, obviously my friend who won the free trail, he was going. One of the things that's prevented me from really going international quite yet is the cost associated. It's quite costly to travel when you're not supported in any way. So having a friend to go split costs with made sense this year. But yeah, it has a lot of the aspects of running that I like. Technical, rocky, very similar to Arizona. Arizona's a great place to train for it, so I've heard. We'll see if that actually translates.
And it's to your point about like going international. It's tough too when there's so much awesome domestic stuff. Like your schedule this year is like High Lonesome, Broken Arrow. Did you go back east too in the spring?
I did Breakneck. That was a world's
Breakneck,
qualifier. That was a wild course. I don't know if I would return to that course specifically, but there's some very neat races, some hard races out there.
Yeah, it truly is the Beast Coast, at least in some sections. I pulled this quote from your Instagram. You said, quote, "Finally, I feel like I have pieced together the skill set and the resilience to handle this course," which I think kind of pairs nicely with what you said earlier about sort of like getting your body ready for the musculoskeletal demands of trail running. Talk about this, because you've been in the sport for 2.5 years now. I would still consider you like a relative newcomer on the scene in terms of like getting to that sort of like professional level. But yeah, like what are those skill set components? What are those resilience components that have mattered to you?
Yeah, so I think for quite a while in my 20s, I just felt rather breakable. I'm tall, and what is one of the compromising elements of breakdown during these long endurance events is energy leak. And so the longer, the taller you are, the more opportunity for energy leak. So, you have to be quite strong, and you have to put quite a bit of muscle mass, or to an extent, a decent amount of muscle mass on you to withstand climbing and descending thousands and thousands of feet for hours on end. So that didn't happen overnight. That's another one of those things that strategically working with some of the best physiotherapists or strength and conditioning coaches in Flagstaff really helped me get to a point where my body seems pretty bulletproof. I'm not injured. I'm able to stack much larger weeks than ever before, and my body has the capacity for much higher load. So I draw a lot of comfort in that I'm in a place where I really, really fully trust my body. I can be out there for 20 plus hours, and I know my T-band's not going to blow up. I'm like, my back's not going to give out. Something other than me falling, which happens more than I'd like to admit. My body's very structurally sound. I don't know if that answers the question, but that feeds then into your mental strength. So you could trust your body, and then mentally you're fortified to be able to just switch focus on other things like, nutrition and, mental awareness, and breaking down the race, knowing you can confidently push and back off when needed and compete at a level that you desire.
And, going back to what you said earlier about college and that sort of being the place where you started to gain trust in this process and that ability, it's cool that it's been this, like, we'll call it 8-10 year build, right? And I think that, like, the final piece, the mindset, is huge.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say I have the mindset piece worked out yet. I definitely feel like I've been listening to things on repeat, various mindset audiobooks and coaches, and that's the tricky part. It's different for everyone. There's skill sets you can hone and perfect, but I think it actually comes through the competition and the racing itself. So you could practice it to an extent in your own training, but you're not going to be out there for like 10, 20 hours in training. So those are when you get into the dark moments and actually pull that out and try it.
Well, I gotta do a little bit of inception here and reference a quote within a quote. But I was just talking with Marianne Hogan for this preview, and I don't know if it was in that interview or what she said after Bandera last year, but she basically said it's very hard to beat a person who's having fun. And you've kind of said something similar where you kind of talked about Cape Town, saying this has been one of the most fun, one of the most feel good training cycles of my career. So would you say that has added to sort of the mental confidence as well?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're excited about the runs that you're putting together for training and those, I mean, it all comes back to like, are you aligning what your passions are or what you actually love about the sport with the races that you choose? And then naturally, when you get into the specific phase of your training, you're absolutely psyched to get on, various courses that you've made to simulate the actual race. Like that, some of the long runs I've done have been the most fun, the best days I've had this fall. And even if the race is a total wash, I can look back at all the, long runs and projects, various objectives I had this fall. And they were so fun and so cool. And just that in and of itself leaves me very, very satisfied.
I've got to ask you about the competition at this race, given that you're so up to date on this stuff. You probably know more than I do, if I'm being honest. Who's exciting you on this start line? Who are you looking forward to running with, and why?
Man, there's a lot of my heroes out there, the role models in the sport. Ruth Croft is obviously an incredible athlete, so humble and just graceful in the way she goes about competing. And she's actually training in Flagstaff last year, and I was supposed to share a run with her, and she got COVID, so I guess I'll get to meet her officially, hopefully in Cape Town. And then obviously Marianne Hogan is so happy. I don't think I've met a more well, I've not met her, but I have not followed a more joyful, happy, upbeat, enthusiastic athlete. And like, how can you not be pumped to run with someone who's just loving every step of that race and loving the grind and the hurt deep in their race? I don't think I've ever seen her without a smile on her face.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Leah, obviously, hometown hero for you. Leah is a remarkable talent here in the U.S. and I've had the pleasure of meeting her, but I've never shared miles. So yeah, those three, very, very excited to hopefully be up there with them for quite a few miles. On the guy side too, it's pretty stacked. It's incredible the depth that this race has pulled this year. So it's exciting.
I think the last thing I want to ask you in this particular conversation is another quote. All I got is quotes in this interview, and you have this sort of like choice when you're evaluating a race, and you say like you can either look at it through the lens of being happy with your result or being happy with your process. And I'd love for you to talk more about that distinction, because I think that's a really interesting way to think about the ways you can evaluate something and why one might be better than the other.
That's a good question, Finn. Yeah, I mean, obviously your process or your journey or how you go about getting somewhere is one of the more fulfilling parts and pieces of it. And you'll hear everyone say you're not going to learn much from a win. So if your process is perfect and then you win the race, you're not going to learn anything from it. I've had a really smooth build up to this, but I mean, it has still had tons of hiccups in it. It's still like, I was out a week and a half with a bone contusion, and, I fell more times than I'd like. I'm always creaking. I mean, those undulations in the process, those unpredictable elements, I think build resilience and just taking in everything as it comes with you. And then when you do get the result, I mean, the results are they're very satisfying. They enforce or reinforce the fact that hard work does pay off. And I think that's important to feel like you're gaining mastery over something. But I think it's important to go into it realizing that, like the results, they're not going to come every time unless you're maybe Courtney Dauwalter. So, putting maybe, I would say, more emphasis on the process and, set appropriate outcome goals. And then, try to make your average days still some of them very solid. You can still podium on your average days with the right goals in mind.
Maybe one more question, and I think you've already done a great job of communicating, what you were happy with in the specific process for Cape Town, but maybe looking at, like Breakneck and Broken Arrow and High Lonesome, what were some of the learnings there that might be contributable to Cape Town as well?
I think anything after High Lonesome from like a time on feet perspective will seem like nothing. I mean, being out there, 26, almost 27 hours, just in training, that's made, a 6, 7, 8 hour run feel short. So that's really kind of reframed how long actually is. And then Breakneck was 10 out of 10 the most technical race I have ever done. So kind of the mental, like staying mentally engaged, that was only 4 hours, but still, this race, Cape Town's going to require, mental focus for very long periods of time. Like, it pretty much, you're always on, talking yourself through how to navigate technical terrain. So that combined with the fact that anything under 15 hours probably will feel relatively short, I think is going to set me up to have a better mental game than maybe
Awesome.
where I was at last year.
Awesome. Well, Lindsey, we're super excited to follow your race next weekend. Thank you so much for your time, the wisdom, the generosity in your answers. We'll make sure to link to all of your social media in the show notes. Any final thoughts or, calls to action that you might have for listeners and viewers before we go?
Off the top of my head, I don't think so. But thanks for having me, Finn. It's been great chatting.